child support. Now we were all gathered in a conference room with a judge. It was my turn to speak up and tell the judge what I needed. Since I had given up working when the children were born and Jeff was a successful attorney from a wealthy family, I was hoping to convince the judge to grant me enough financial support so I could stay home with our girls for a few more years. My twin daughters, only 6 years old at that point, were everything to me. I had been completely committed to being the best stay-at-home mom possible. I wouldn't realize this until much later, but focusing on the children was my way of shutting out everything else that was going wrong with my life. As I described my situation, I tried to speak confidently despite the tremor in my voice. The judge was an older woman, so I felt optimistic that she would understand my plight and give me some leeway. I was wrong. The judge simply shook her head when I finished speaking, as Jeff and his lawyers glared at me. I wouldn't be getting any increase in child support, she told me, and I would have to go out and get a job. I summoned the courage to reason with her. Perhaps she didn't fully understand. I wasn't asking for a great deal of extra child support or alimony, simply enough to allow me to continue maintaining a home for the girls so their lives would remain as stable and happy as possible. Your Honor, I really don't have a lot of options, I said. My only work experience at this point is teaching fitness classes, and the pay in that field is really not substantial at all. I don't see how I'm going to be able to support myself and the girls. Why don't you become a real estate broker? Jeff suggested from across the table. Because I don't want to be a real estate broker, I shot back. He knew that would be about the last thing I'd ever want to do. I realized that Jeff was trying to needle me because he was furious, but understanding his anger did nothing to lessen my own. Between the ages of 8 and 22, I had followed my dream and trained as a dancer. When that didn't work out, raising our children became my next reason for being. My whole life had been about two things: wanting to find work that brought me joy and devoting myself to motherhood. This next chapter now loomed before me like a black, uncharted sea. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't picture the future. However, I knew I was beaten. I could see from my own lawyers' faces that this judge wasn't going to budge an inch. I had no choice but to move forward. So what next? The road to my divorce didn't truly begin until 1992, when I went to see a psychotherapist for the first time. By then, I had been married for 8 years. I wasn't especially happy in my relationship with Jeff. Ironically, however, I didn't seek out a therapist because my marriage was in trouble, but because my beloved father was dying, and I was having trouble coping with the thought of losing him forever. I realize now how odd it must seem that I never sought out any sort of counseling before that point, since my own mother was a therapist. But I suppose that's actually why I never looked for anyone else to help me understand my problems. My mother was always quick to offer her opinions on how I should live. I had spent much of my childhood feeling completely reliant on her. Why would I need a therapist? It wasn't until my father was in the last stages of cancer and my mother was consumed by her own complicated cocktail of grief and anger that I realized I needed to seek emotional support elsewhere to help me handle the loss. I was 34 years old at the time and feeling overwhelmed by the nonstop demands of my twin toddlers and my husband. My father has always been the light of my life, I told the therapist during the first session, choking up as I tried to describe our relationship. Dad had curly dark blonde hair, hazel eyes, and a slight paunch because he loved to eat. He was hilarious and always described me as his best audience. He had no trouble laughing at his own jokes, no matter how dumb they were. I'd collapse in giggles, too. I loved it that my father wasn't afraid to make a fool of himself or break the rules. Once, when I was about 12 years old, he drove me to dance class. It was pouring rain, and there was a broad, raised walkway to the studio's front door. As I was trying to figure out how to run from the car to the studio without getting drenched, my father suddenly drove the car right up the curb and onto the walkway straight to the front door. "Dad!" I shrieked, but all he did was laugh. What choice did I have but to giggle and throw my arms around his neck when he delivered me right to the door of the dance studio, like my knight in shining armor? It often felt like he and I had our own secret club.